Regret. See repentance. Harbiri middle dot har middle dot by our Jehovah has wide and made spacious. Grandson of Moses, only son of Eliezer, and founder of a family of Levites that still existed when David was king. 1 Ch 23. 15, 17. 24. 21. 26. 25. Rehob Public Square. Broad Place. 1. Father of Hadadezer the king of Zobah against whom David warred victoriously. 2 Sa'at. 3-12. 2. One of the Levites or the forefather of one attesting by seal a covenant in the time of Nehemiah and Ezra. Ne 10. 1, 9, 11. 3. A place or city mentioned in the exploration of Canaan by the 12 Hebrew spies sent out by Moses. New 13. 21. It is probably the same place as Rehob and Beth Rehob mentioned at 2 Samuel 10. 6, 8. See Beth Rehob. 4. The name of at least one and perhaps two cities in the territory of Asher. Jos 19. 24, 28, 30. While some scholars consider both references to denote the same city, other related texts appear to indicate separate sites. Thus, Judges 1. 31, 32 says that Asher did not drive out the inhabitants of Rehob, so that the Asherites were obliged to dwell among the Canaanites of the land, whereas Joshua 21. 27, 31 and 1 Chronicles 6. 71, 75 state, in time, they revolted against King Abimelech. In crushing the revolt, Abimelech destroyed the city and sowed it with salt, this perhaps being symbolic of desiring lasting desolation. JG 8. 31-33. 9. 1-49. Compare PS 107. 33, 34. See Abimelech no. 4. Baal-berith. Later Shechem was rebuilt. That it became an important city is suggested by the fact that Hoboam was installed as king there. 1 Chi 12. 1 After the division of the kingdom, Jeroboam, first king of the northern kingdom, had building work done at Shechem and apparently ruled from there for a time. 1 Chi 12. 25 centuries later, in 607 BCE after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, men from Shechem came to Jerusalem for worship. Jah 41. 5. Shechemites Shechem Middle-ites of belonging to Shechem. The descendants of Manasseh through Shechem. New 26. 29, 31. Sheda Shedia Middle-Your possibly, light of the Almighty. A Reubenite whose son Elijah was appointed by Jehovah to be chieftain of their tribe in the wilderness. New 1. 5. 2. 10. 7. 30, 35. 10. 18. Sheep. One of the principal animals of pastoral life. GE 24. 35. 26. 14 sheep are ruminants, or cud-chewers. As is the case today, the predominant variety of ancient Palestine may have been the broad-tailed sheep, distinguished by its prominent fatty tail, generally weighing about 5 kilograms 11 pounds or more. Compare X 29. 22. La 3. 9. Generally sheep were white in color. 6. 6, though they were also dark brown and parti-colored ones. GE 30. 32 In a pastoral society men of great wealth, such as Job, had thousands of sheep. Job 1. 3, 16. 42. 12 The Israelites probably kept some lambs as pets. 2 So 12. 3. Jer 11. 19. Without a shepherd, domestic sheep are helpless and fearful. They get lost and scattered and are at the complete mercy of their enemies. New 27. 16, 17. Jer 23. 4. S 34. 5, 6, 8. Mic 5. 8 sheep allow themselves to be led, and they faithfully follow their shepherd. they can learn to recognize his voice and to respond to him alone. Joe 10. 2-5 illustrating this is a passage from Researches in Greece and the Levant, by J. Hartley, London, 1831, pages 321, 322. Having had my attention directed last night to the words in John X. 3. I asked my man if it was usual in Greece to give names to the sheep. He informed me that it was, and that the sheep obeyed the shepherd when o textoi acute miritra longo, sheep 916 Joes 6. 4-6, 8, 13. 1 16. 1 sheepskins sometimes served as clothing Heb 11. 37, and ram skins that had been dyed red were used in the construction of the tabernacle. X 26. 14 sheep's wool furnished the fiber for what was probably the most common material for clothing. Job 31. 20. PR 27. 26 sheep served as an important item of trade Des 27. 21, and they were even used to pay tribute. 2 Chi 3. 4. 2 Ch 17. 11 both the milk and the meat of sheep were items of diet. The 14. 4. 32. 14. 2 17. 29. Issa 7. 21, 22 mutton and lamb were enjoyed regularly by kings, governors, and others. 1 8. 17. 1 Chi 4. 22, 23. Any 5. 18. Am 6. 4. The meat was prepared by boiling or roasting. For the Passover, a year-old ram or male goat was roasted whole after the skin was removed and the internal organs were cleaned. X 12. 5, 9 When a sheep was prepared by boiling, the animal was first skinned and then disjointed. At times the bones were cracked open to free the marrow. Both the flesh and the bones were boiled in a large vessel. As 24. 3-6, 10. Mic 3. 1-3 Once the meat was cooked, it was removed from the pot, and the remaining broth was served separately. Compare JG 6. 19. Serving lamb to a guest was a gesture of hospitality. 2 12. 4. The time for shearing the sheep was looked forward to with anticipation, as it was much like a harvest. Feasting and rejoicing attended the event, pondered in fire. And its smoke kept ascending like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain o textoi acute miritra longo, kinsman 152 kinsman. Relative, either by common ancestry or by marriage. Kinsman has special reference to a male relative. There are several words in the original Bible languages having the following meanings and usages. Go middle.l from Heb. Go middle.al, meaning redeem or buy back, has reference to the nearest male relative with the right of a repurchaser or an avenger of blood. Willful murderers were to be put to death by the avenger of blood. New 35. 16-19 Boaz's relationship to Naomi and Ruth was that of a repurchaser. Ru 2. 20. 3. 9, 12, 13. 4. 1, 3, 6, 8, 14 Jehovah himself, the great Father or Lawgiver, is both an avenger and a repurchaser for his servants. PS 78. 35. Isra 41. 14. 43. 14. 44. 6, 24. 48. 17. 54. 5. 63. 16. Ja 50. 34. Sheoheb. Meaning organism has reference to a fleshly relative or blood relative. God's laws forbade having sexual relations with a close blood relation, such as one's aunt. Law 18. 6-13. 20. 19 If a fellow Israelite fell into debt to an alien, then a brother, an uncle, a cousin, or any other blood relative could buy him back. Law 25. 47-49 Or if one died having no sons, daughters, brothers, or uncles, then the next closest blood relation received the inheritance. New 27. 10, 11. Committal. Heb. Meaning near includes not only one closely related but also an intimate acquaintance. If a brother became so poor that he had to sell his possessions, then one closely related had to buy them back for him. 25. 25 Job grieved that his intimate acquaintances had left him, and David lamented that his close acquaintances also stood aloof. Job 19. 14. PS 38. 11. Terms related to your middle. Deheb. Meaning no, be acquainted could mean a kinsman or just an acquaintance. Naomi had a kinsman of her husband named Boaz. Jehu executed all of Ahab's house including his acquaintances. Ru 2. 1. 2 Kai 10. 11. In the Christian Greek scriptures sig-middle.nes refers to a relative by blood, but it is never used in speaking of the relation between parents and children. Following this rule, note that Jesus said to his followers, "You will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives sig-middle.non and friends." Luke 21. 16 When the 12-year-old Jesus was missing, his parents began looking for him among the relatives. Luke 2. 44 When you spread a feast, Jesus counseled, do not invite your relatives who could pay you back but, rather, the poor people. Luke 14. 12-14 When Peter brought the good news of salvation to Cornelius, his relatives were also present. Act 10. 24 Paul, in his letter to the Romans, referred to the Israelites collectively as well as a number of individuals as his relatives. Row 9. 3. 16. 7, 11, 21. Kinakaina. A city of southern Judah. Jos 15. 21, 22 Some identify it with Kibbutz Tayyib or Vatov, about 30 kilometers 90 mi of Beersheba. The name seems to be preserved in Wadi el-Kaini nearby. Kind. The creation record found in the first chapter of Genesis reveals that Jehovah God created Earth's living things according to their kinds. G1. 11. FTN Toward the end of the sixth creative day the Earth was supplied with a great variety of basic created kinds, which included very complex forms of life. These were endowed with the capacity for reproducing offspring according to their kinds in a fixed, orderly manner. G1. 12, 21, 22, 24, 25. 1 Co 14. 33. The biblical kind seem to constitute divisions of life forms wherein each division allows for cross-fertility within its limits. If so, then the boundary between kinds is to be drawn at the point where fertilization ceases to occur. In recent years, the term species has been applied in such a manner as to cause confusion when it is compared with the word kind. The basic meaning of species is as sort. Kind. Variety. In biologic terminology, however, it applies to any group of interfertile animals or plants mutually possessing Otextoe acute Muritra longo. Kindness 153 This phenomenon makes possible, through the test of sterility, the determining of the boundaries of all the kinds in existence today. Through this natural test of fertilization it is possible to uncover the primary relationships within animal life and plant life. For example, sterility presents an impassable gulf between man and the animals, equipping it with a large network of underground tunnels, evidently to supply fresh water. Another capital was Susa Shushan located near the Chospeskaka River in ancient Elam, occupying a strategic central location between Babylon, Ecbatana, and Persepolis. Here Darius the Great built a magnificent palace that served generally as a winter residence, for, as at Babylon, the summer heat at Susa was extreme. However, as time progressed Susa became more and more the real administrative center of the empire. See Ecbatana. Shushan. Religion and law. The Persian rulers, while as capable of cruelty as the Semitic kings of Assyria and Babylonia, initially at least seem to have endeavored to manifest a degree of fairness and legality in their dealings with the conquered Pir-Human-headed bulls near the entrance to the city of Persepolis, Persia, Persian 613 bulls. Their religion apparently contained some concept of ethics. Following their chief god Aramazda, a principal deity was Mithra, who became known not only as a god of war, but also as the god of contracts, the one whose eyes and ears were ever alert to spy out any violator of an agreement. See gods and goddesses. Greek historian Herodotus I, 136-138 wrote of the Persians. They educate their boys from 5 to 20 years old, and teach them 3 things only, riding and archery and truth-telling. They hold lying to be foulest of all. While the history of the Persian rulers shows them to be not above duplicity and intrigue, yet a basic adherence to some tribal creed of keeping one's word may be reflected in their insistence on the inviolability of the law of the Medes and the Persians. Dar 6. 8, 15. As 1. 19. 8. 8. Thus, when Cyrus' decree was found some 18 years after its date of issuance, King Darius recognized the legality of the Jews' position as regards the building of the temple, and gave orders that full cooperation be extended to them. As 6. 1-12. Considerable administrative ability is evidenced in the Persian imperial organization. In addition to the king's own privy council, or advisory board, composed of 7 princes of Persia and Media as 1. 14. As 7. 14. There were satraps appointed over major regions or countries, such as Media, Elam, Parthia, Babylonia, Assyria, Arabia, Armenia, Cappadocia, Lydia, Ionia, and, as the empire expanded, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Libya. These satraps were granted a measure of autonomy in the government of the satrapy, including the administration of judicial and financial affairs within their territory. See satrap. Within the satrapy there appear to have been subordinate governors of jurisdictional districts numbering 127 in King Ahasuerus' day, and within the jurisdictional districts there were princes of the particular peoples composing the district's population. As rate. 36. As 3. 12. 8. 9. Likely to overcome the disadvantage of the imperial capitals being somewhat in a corner of the far-flung domain, a speedy system of communication was developed by means of a royal mail service employing couriers riding post horses, thereby connecting the throne with all the jurisdictional districts. As 8. 10. 14. Royal highways were maintained. One ran from Shushan all the way to Sudas in Asia Minor. From Cyrus' death to Darius' death. The reign of Cyrus the Great ended in 530 BCE when he died while on a warring campaign. His son Cambyses succeeded him to the throne and was successful in conquering Egypt. Though not referred to by the name Cambyses in the Bible, he is evidently the Ahasuerus to whom the opposers of the temple work sent false accusations against the Jews, as stated at Ezra 4. 6. The circumstances involving the end of Cambyses' rule are confused. One account, set forth by Darius the Great in his tongue inscription, and recounted by Herodotus and others with certain variations, is that Cambyses had his brother Bardia called Asmodus by Herodotus secretly put to death. Then, during Cambyses' absence in Egypt, a Magian named Gomata also called Asmodus by Herodotus, posing as Bardia Asmodus, usurped the throne and was able to gain recognition as king. While returning from Egypt, Cambyses died, and thus the usurper became secure on the throne. Herodotus, 3, 61-67. The other version, favored by some historians, is that Bardia had not been killed and that he, not some impostor, usurped the throne during Cambyses' absence. Whatever the case, the reign of Cambyses ended in 522 BCE and the rule that followed lasted 7 months, ending also in 522 BCE with the assassination of the usurper either Bardia or Gomata the pseudo-Asmodus. Yet during this brief rule apparently a second charge against the Jews was directed to the Persian throne, the king then being designated in O Textoi Acute Muritra Longo, Persia, Persian 614 fit the description of the fourth Persian king, who would rouse up everything against the kingdom of Greece. Dar 11. To endeavoring to retaliate for the Persian defeat at Marathon, Xerxes launched massive forces against the Greek mainland in 480 BCE following a costly victory at Thermopylae and the destruction of Athens. His forces met defeat at Salamis and later at Plataea, causing Xerxes to return to Persia. Xerxes' reign was marked by certain administrative reforms and the completion of much of the construction work his father had initiated at Persepolis. Compare Is 10. 1, 2. The Greek stories of the end of Xerxes' reign revolve around marital difficulties, disorders in the harem, and a supposed dominance of 24 Paul's thorn in the flesh 2 Co 12. 7 may have been an affliction of his eye or another part of his body see Act 23. 1-5. 4. 15. 6. 11 or perhaps the false apostles and other disturbers who challenged Paul's apostleship and work. C 2 Co 11. 5, 6, 12-15. Go 1. 6-9. 5. 12. 6. 17. Jehovah, through his prophet Jeremiah, compared the hearts of the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to ground covered with thorns, that is, with untruth, injustice, and unrighteousness. J 4. 1-4. Compare Ho 10. 12, 13. Fittingly the replacement of thorns by trees represents the restoration of divine favor. Isla 55. 13. See bramble, briar, bush, lotus tree, weeds, thorn bush, sea bush. 3 Taverns. A resting place attested to in ancient writings, situated on the Appian Way, the well-known highway that ran from Rome to Brundisium by way of Capua. The place perhaps got its name from 3 inns where travellers could stop to rest and refresh themselves. The site of 3 Taverns is 49 kilometres 30 miles of Rome. The marketplace of Appius was about 15 kilometres 9.5 miles farther down the Appian Way. A few Roman ruins are all that remain today at the site. Having heard about Paul's coming, part of the delegation of the Christians from Rome waited at 3 Taverns, while the rest travelled as far as the marketplace of Appius. Act 28. 13-15. Threshing. The process of releasing grain from each stalk and chaff. If gleaners had a small amount to thresh, or if the grain was of small size like cumin, or if the threshing was done secretly during dangerous times, a rod or flail was used to beat the grain by hand, either on the ground or in a winepress. JG 6. 11. Ru 2. 17. Isla 28. 27. The threshing floor, however, was the location of normal threshing operations. Usually situated on a higher elevation exposed to the wind, it consisted of a flat circular area, up to 15 meters, 50 feet in diameter, made either of stone or hard-packed earth. Threshing floors not privately owned were often clustered together near a village for communal use. The sheaves of barley or wheat, the principal grains of Palestine, were spread out on the floor today generally to a depth of 30 to 46 centimeters 12 to 18 inches. The treading by bulls or other animals, as they constantly circled the floor, gradually broke down the straw and freed the grain from the chaff. The animals were not muzzled while treading the grain. De 25. 4. Ho 10. 11. 1 Co 9. 9, 10. Threshing instruments pulled by animals speeded up the process and were more thorough than animal hooves alone. Isla 41. 15. M1. 3 models used in more modern times are either broad flat heavy sledges with sharp teeth of stone or of iron on their underside or frames that pull heavy cylindrical otex to a acute meter longo. Throne 1097 threshing also illustrates the crushing treatment men sometimes mete out to others. 2 Chi 13. 7 or the separation of wheat from chaff may depict the separation of the righteous from the wicked by Jehovah's judgment. Mount 3. 12 in yet another sense, a long and bountiful threshing denotes prosperity and Jehovah's blessing. La 26. 5. Jo 2. 24. Throat. See neck. Throne. The Hebrew term kiss middle dots basically means seat 1 sa 4. 13. Chetu Kai 4. 10. Or a seat of special importance such as a throne 1 Ka 22. 10. Its application is not limited to the seats of ruling monarchs 1 Kai 2. 19. Eni 3. 7. Es 3. 1. Es 26. 16. Nor does it strictly refer to a seat with a high back and armrests. Eli, for instance, while at the gate of Shiloh, fell backward from his kiss middle dots, evidently a backless seat. 1 Sa 4. 13. 18. The Greek term thronumbus generally refers to a high stool, with back, arms, and a footstool. Isaiah 14. 9 intimates that thrones were universally used by monarchs, the Bible specifically mentioning the thrones of Egypt g 41. 40. X 11. 5. 12. 29, Assyria John 3. 6, Babylon Issa 14. 4, 13. Dar 5. 20, Persia is 1. 2. 5. 1, and Moab JJ 3. 17, 20. Archaeologists believe that they have found thrones used by rulers or their associates of all these powers, except Moab. An ivory panel, thought to depict a Canaanite throne and footstool, was found at Megiddo. Generally, these non-Israelite thrones have backs and armrests, being richly carved or ornamented. From his accession year or his 18th regnal year, a breach was made in Jerusalem's wall. Zedekiah and his men fled but were overtaken in the desert plains of Jericho. Since Nebuchadnezzar had retired to Riblah in the land of Hamath, Zedekiah was brought before him there. Nebuchadnezzar had all of Zedekiah's sons slaughtered, and then he blinded and bound Zedekiah in order to take him as a prisoner to Babylon. The post-conquest details, including the burning of the temple and the houses of Jerusalem, the disposition of temple utensils, and the taking of captives, were handled by Nebuzaradan, the chief of the bodyguard. Over those not taken captive, Gedaliah, an appointee of Nebuchadnezzar, served as governor. 2 Chi 25. 1-22. 2 Ch 36. 17-20. J 52. 1-27, 29. His dream of an immense image. The Book of Daniel states that it was in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's kingship, probably counting from the destruction of Jerusalem in 607 BCE, and therefore actually referring to his 20th regnal year, that Nebuchadnezzar had the dream about the golden-headed image. Dar 2. 1. Although the magic-practicing priests, conjurers, and Chaldeans were unable to interpret this dream, the Jewish prophet Daniel did so. This moved Nebuchadnezzar to acknowledge Daniel's God as a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets. He then constituted Daniel ruler over all the jurisdictional district of Babylon and the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also appointed Daniel's 3 companions, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to administrative posts. Dar 2. Later exiles of Jews. About 3 years later, in the 23rd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, more Jews were taken into exile. J 52. 30. This exile probably involved Jews who had fled to lands that were later conquered by the Babylonians. Lending support to this conclusion is the statement of the historian Josephus. In the 5th year after the sacking of Jerusalem, which was the 23rd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar marched against Kosseir and, after occupying it, made war both on the Moabites and the Ammonites. Then, after making these nations subject to him, he invaded Egypt in order to subdue it, and, having killed the king who was then reigning and appointed another, he again took captive the Jews who were in the country and carried them to Babylon. Jewish Antiquities, X, 181, 182-9, 7. Takes Tyre. It was also some time after the fall of Jerusalem in 607 BCE that Nebuchadnezzar began the siege against Tyre. During this siege the heads of his soldiers were made bald from the chafing of the helmets, and their shoulders were rubbed bare from carrying materials used in the construction of siege works. As Nebuchadnezzar received no wages for serving as Jehovah's instrument in executing judgment upon Tyre, he promised to give him the wealth of Egypt. As 26. 7-11. 29. 17-20. See Tyre. 1 fragmentary Babylonian O textoi acute miritra longo and Boshazban 482 mote, I reached the level of the water. I then saw that the wall which my father had prepared was too small in its construction. I built with bitumen and brick a mighty wall which, like a mountain, could not be moved, and connected it with the wall of my father. I laid its foundations on the breast of the underworld. Its top I raised up like a mountain. Along this wall to strengthen it I constructed a third, and as the base of a protecting wall I laid a foundation of bricks and built it on the breast of the underworld and laid its foundation. the fortifications of Esagila and Babylon I strengthened and established the name of my reign forever. Archaeology and the Bible, by G. Barton, 1949, pages 478, 479. The foregoing harmonizes with Nebuchadnezzar's boast made just before he lost his sanity. Is not this Babylon the Great, that I myself have built for the royal house with the strength of my might and for the dignity of my majesty? Darfur 30. But when, in fulfillment of his divinely sent dream about the chopped down tree, his reasoning powers were restored, Nebuchadnezzar had to acknowledge that Jehovah is able to humiliate those walking in pride. Darfur 37. See madness. Very religious. The indications are that Nebuchadnezzar was extremely religious, building and beautifying the temples of numerous Babylonian deities. Particularly was he devoted to the worship of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon. To him Nebuchadnezzar gave credit for his military victories. Trophies of war, including the sacred vessels of Jehovah's temple, appear to have been deposited in the temple of Marduk Merodach. As 1. 7. 5. 14 says an inscription of Nebuchadnezzar. For thy glory, O exalted Merodach, a house have I made. May it receive within itself the abundant tribute of the kings of nations and of all peoples. Records of the past. Assyrian and Egyptian Monuments, London, 1875, Volume V, p. 135. The image of gold set up by Nebuchadnezzar in the plain of Dura was perhaps dedicated to Marduk and designed to promote religious unity in the empire. Enraged over the refusal of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to worship this image even after being given a second opportunity, Nebuchadnezzar commanded that they be thrown into a fiery furnace heated sod, under judgment, and he then quotes from Proverbs 11:31 LXX warning them of the danger of disobedience. He here implies that their present judgment could end with a judgment of everlasting destruction for them, just as Paul had written. 1 Pe 4. 17, 18. The Apostle Paul also tells of some who will undergo the judicial punishment of everlasting destruction from before the Lord and from the glory of his strength, at the time he comes to be glorified in connection with his holy ones. 2 Th 1. 9, 10. These would therefore not survive into the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and since their destruction is everlasting, they would receive no resurrection. Resurrection during 1,000 years. The exact number of humans who have ever lived is unknown to humans. However, by way of illustration, if Jehovah resurrects 20,020,000,000,000 people, there would be no problemo textoi acute miritra longo. Retirement 793 of them did not in the past know God and must learn to conform to his laws for them. First, the Bible states that the kingdom of the world becomes the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he rules as king forever and ever. Re 11. 15. And the Bible principle is that when there are judgments from you Jehovah for the earth, righteousness is what the inhabitants of the productive land will certainly learn. Issa 26. 9. In his due time, when it is necessary to make it known to his servants, God will reveal how he purposes to take care of this work. And 3. 7. How would it be possible in 1,000 years to resurrect and educate the billions now in the grave? Nevertheless, an illustration reveals what a simple, practical thing Jehovah has in mind for mankind. Not to prophesy, but merely for the purpose of illustration, let us assume that those who compose the great crowd of righteous persons who come out of the great tribulation on this system of things alive Ray 7. 9, 14 number about 6,000, -000 about 1/1000 of Earth's present population. Then if, after allowing, say, 100 years spent in their training and in subduing a portion of the Earth G1. 28, God purposes to bring back 3% of this number, this would mean that each newly arrived person would be looked after by 33 trained ones. Since a yearly increase of 3%, compounded, doubles the number about every 24 years, the entire 20,020,000,000 could be resurrected before 400 years of Christ's 1,000-year reign had elapsed, giving ample time for training and judging the resurrected ones without disrupting harmony and order on earth. Thus God, with his almighty power and wisdom, is able to bring his purpose to glorious conclusion fully within the framework of the laws and arrangements he has made for mankind from the beginning, with the added undeserved kindness of the resurrection. Row 11. 33-36. Retirement. Withdrawal from one's employment or from certain aspects of it. In assigning the Levites not of the priestly family of Aaron to serve at the tent of meeting under the direction of the priests, Jehovah made loving provisions for their welfare. He commanded Moses. This is what applies to the Levites. From 25 years old upward he will come to enter into the company in the service of the tent of meeting. But after the age of 50 years he will retire from the service company and serve no longer. And he must minister to his brothers in the tent of meeting in taking care of the obligation, but he must render no service. New 8. 23-26. 1ch 23. 3. At Numbers chapter 4 the service organization of the Levites is described. There it is stated that they were to be registered from the ages of 30 to 50. It was heavy manual labor to set up, take down, and transport the tent of meeting. The 96 socket pedestals of silver for the panel frames weighed a talent c. 34 kilograms. 92 pounds to each. There were also 4 pedestals for the pillars between the holy and most holy compartments, of probably the same weight, and 5 copper pedestals for the pillars at the tabernacle entrance. X 26. 19, 21, 25, 32, 37. 38. 27 The 48 panel frames 4.5 meters 4.6 feet long. 67 centimeters 26 inches wide were made of acacia, a finer grained, heavy wood, which was gold-plated. X 26. 15-25, 29 There were gold-plated bars running lengthwise on each side and across the back of the tabernacle. X 26. 26-29 All these items would be heavy. Additionally, there was the considerable weight of the coverings of sealskin, ram skin, goat hair, and linen, as well as the linen screen around the courtyard, with its pillars, socket pedestals, tent pins, and so forth. So the handling of the tabernacle o textoi acute muritra longo, retribution 794, because at the temple more would be needed to care for the greatly enlarged services there. 1ch 23. 24-27. The Levites who retired at the age of 50 did not retire from all service. They could still serve voluntarily and minister to their brothers in the tent of meeting in taking care of the obligation. New 8. 26 Probably they served as counselors and assisted in caring for some of the lighter work included in the obligation of the Levites, but they were spared the heavier work. And they were still teachers of the law to the people. 33. 8-10 This is the Hadish palace which at Susa I built. From afar its ornamentation was brought. Deep down the earth was dug, until rock bottom I reached. When the excavation was made, gravel was packed down, one part 60 feet, the other 30 feet in depth. On that gravel a palace I built. And that the earth was dug down and the gravel packed and the mud brick formed in molds, that the Babylonians did. The cedar timber was brought from a mountain named Lebanon. The Assyrians brought it to Babylon, and from Babylon the Carians and Ionians brought it to Susa. Teak wood was brought from Gandhara and from Campania. The gold which was used here was brought from Sardis and from Bactria. The stone, lapis lazuli and carnelian, was brought from Sogdiana. The turquoise was brought from Chorasmia. The silver and copper were brought from Egypt. The ornamentation with which the wall was adorned was brought from Ionia. The ivory was brought from Ethiopia, from India, and from Arachosia. The stone pillars were brought from a place named Abaradush in Elam. The artisans who dressed the stone were Ionians and Sardians. The goldsmiths who wrought the gold were Medes and Egyptians. Those who worked the inlays were Sardians and Egyptians. Those who worked the baked brick with figures were Babylonians. The men who adorned the wall were Medes and Egyptians. At Susa here a splendid work was ordered. Very splendid did it turn out. History of the Persian Empire, by A. T. Olmsted, 1948, p. 168. See Archaeology Persia. Shathelashu the Middle Dotler. 1. A son of Ephraim and forefather of the tribal family of Shathelites. 1ch7. 20. New 26. 35-37 Shahada is not mentioned in the Masoretic text of Genesis 46. 20, but a form of his name is among the several names here added in the Greek Septuagint. 2. An Ephraimic descendant of number 1. 1ch7. 20, 21. Shuthelite Shuthel Middle-Heights of belonging to Shuthela. The family descendants of Shuthela. Included among the registered ones in the tribe of Ephraim at the time of the second census in the wilderness. New 26. 35, 37. Siasia Middle-Ha. One of the Nethinim whose descendants returned from the Babylonian exile with Zerubbabel in 537 BCE as 2. 1, 2, 43, 44. Ne7. 47. Sibakai Sibbi Middle.Chi. One of David's mighty men, a Hushaltite. 1ch11. 26, 29 Sibakai, in a war with the Philistines at Gob, slew Sibai, one of the giant like Rephaim, thereby subduing the enemy. 2 18. 1ch20. For when David organized the monthly rotational service of the nation's forces, Sibakai was placed in charge of the 8th Division. 1ch27. 1, 11 He is apparently called Mbernea 2 Samuel 23. 27. Sibboleth. Shibboleth. Sibma. A town of the Jordan, taken by Israel from Amorite King Sihon and assigned to the Reubenites, who desired it because of surrounding pasturelands. Apparently it was also called a Sebam. New 32. 2-5, O textoi acute muritra longo, sickness 940 sickness. See diseases and treatment. Siddim, low plain of Siddim. A valley linked in scripture with the salt Dead Sea. GE 14. 3 There, in Abraham's day, the rebellious kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboiim, and Zor battled with Elamite king Chedorlaomer and his 3 allies. Defeated, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, only to have some of their troops fall into the pits upon pits of bitumen that filled the area. GE 14. 4, 8-10. Some believe that the lower plain of Siddim is the bay-like section of the Dead Sea of the Sand Peninsula. They believe that it once was a fertile valley and was apparently later submerged, perhaps because of earthquake activity or because of topographical changes resulting from God's destruction of Sodom, Gomorrah, and the entire district. GE 19. 24, 25 From time to time, pieces of bituminous matter still rise to the surface of the shallow waters there. See Salt Sea. Sidon, Sidonian Sea Middle.Dueni Middle.Ans. Canaan's firstborn son Sidon was the progenitor of the Sidonians. The seaport town of Sidon was named after their forefather, and for many years it was the principal city of the Phoenicians, as the Greeks called the Sidonians. Today the city is known as Saida. A colony of Sidonians also settled about 35 kilometers 22 miles of Sidon and called the place Tyre. In time Tyre surpassed Sidon in many respects, but she never completely lost her identity as a Sidonian settlement. The king of Tyre was sometimes called the king of the Sidonians 1 Chi 16. 31, and frequently Tyre and Sidon are mentioned together in prophecy. J 25. 22. 27. 3. 47. 4. Joe 3. 4. Zech 9. 2 Between the two cities was Zarephath, which 28. 7. Most Amalekites passed through Palestine to spend the winter in Africa. An increasing number winter in Israel. They build their nests in the forks of tall trees and store food in the nest before laying eggs. The red kite, a rare winter visitor, is a reddish-brown bird, barred with black, with a grayish-white head. Kitron Kitron from a root meaning make sacrificial smoke. A city from which the Zebulunites failed to expel the Canaanite inhabitants. JG 1. 30 Although various sites have been suggested, none is certain. This ancient city in Zebulun may be the same as Katath. Jos 19. 15. Kittim. Kittim is listed as one of the 4 sons of Javan, although the name appears only in the plural form in all scriptural references. GE 10. 4. 1 ch 1. 7. The name thereafter is used to represent a people and region. Josephus Jewish Antiquities, I. 128-6. 1 refer to Kittim as Chethemos and associated it with Cyprus and with the name Chethim given by the Hebrews to all islands and to most maritime countries. The ancient Phoenicians referred to the people of Cyprus as Kitti. Modern authorities generally agree with such identification of Kittim with Cyprus. The city of Kish and City on this coast of Cyprus is best known as a Phoenician colony, and so some scholars have viewed the listing of Kittim among the descendants of Japheth as out of place. GE 10. 2, 4. 1 ch 1. 5, 7. However, the evidence shows that the Phoenicians were relative latecomers to Cyprus and their colony at Kish is considered to date from only about the 9th century BCE. Thus, after the New Encyclopaedia Britannica 1987, Volume 3, p. 332 identifies Kish as the principal Phoenician city in Cyprus, it adds. The earliest remains at Citium are those of an Aegean colony of the Mycenaean age c. 1400 to 1100 BC. See also Volume 16, p. 948. That Kittim may embrace other areas in addition to the island of Cyprus is indicated by Josephus' statement, quoted earlier, about the Hebrew usage of the term as embracing other Mediterranean islands and countries bordering the sea, Cyprus being but the nearest to Palestine of the Kittim lands. This seems to be borne out by the references to the islands or coastlands of Kittim at Ezekiel 27. 6 and Jeremiah 2. 10. Some commentators consider that Kittim is also used in this larger sense at Numbers 24. 24, where the prophet Balaam, who lived contemporaneously with Moses, foretold that ships from the coast of Kittim would afflict Assyria and Eber, but that the attacker would eventually perish. This view would allow for the attack perhaps to originate from the sea-coast region of Macedonia, from which country Alexander the Great advanced, conquering the land of Ashur-Assyria but Babylonia along with the Medo-Persian Empire. Others suggest that the attackers were Romans from the Mediterranean coastlands of Italy. The Latin Vulgate uses Italy in place of Kittim at Numbers 24. 24, and the Targum of Enkelos reads Romans. But the apocryphal book of 1 Maccabees 1. 1. JB uses Kittim to represent the land of Macedonia. In Isaiah's pronouncement against Tyre, Kittim, likely Cyprus, is the point at which the eastbound ships of Tarshish receive the news of Tyre's downfall, and the virgin daughter of Sidon is told by Jehovah to cross over to Kittim itself, in a vain effort to find refuge. Isra 23. 1, 11, 12. This is in harmony with the historical evidence for Phoenician colonies in Cyprus at the time of Isaiah's prophesying c. 778. A 732 BCE? An inscription of Sennacherib relates the flight of King Nulli of Sidon to the island of Idnana, Cyprus as the Reblakite. A bird not suitable for food, according to text to acute Muritra Longo, Neil 179. Salt of the Assyrian attack. Ancient Near Eastern Texts, edited by J. Pritchard, 1974, pages 287. 288. Similarly, many from Tyre evidently sought haven in Cyprus during Nebuchadnezzar's 13-year siege of Tyre, in fulfillment of Isaiah's proclamation. Final mention of Kittim by that name comes in Daniel's prophecy of the rivalry between the king of the north and king of the south, where an attack by the king of the north is thwarted by the ships of Kittim. Da 11. 30. See Cyprus. Kneading trough. A shallow and generally portable bowl-shaped vessel. It was usually made of wood, but sometimes was earthenware or was made of bronze. In it flour and water were mixed and worked into dough. In preparing leavened bread, the mass was usually leavened by working in a piece of dough saved from a previous baking. The mass of dough was left to rise in the kneading trough before baking. G 18. 6. 1 28. 24. The usual method was to knead the dough with one's hands, though the Egyptians also used their feet at times, when kneading dough in a large trough. Ho 7. 4. The size of the kneading bowl, or trough, varied considerably. However, One earthenware type often used was a bowl approximately 25 centimeters 10 inches in diameter and about 8 centimeters 3 inches deep. Bread was an important part of the Hebrew diet and was baked regularly. Hence, the kneading trough was an essential item among the Israelites and other peoples of antiquity. The frog provoked great resentment. A delegation of Jews traveled to Caesarea to protest the presence of the standards and call for their removal. After 5 days of discussion, Pilate sought to frighten the petitioners with the threat of execution by his soldiers, but their determined refusal to yield caused him to accede to their request. Jewish Antiquities, 18, 55-59 1. Philo, a Jewish writer of the 1st century CE in Alexandria, Egypt, describes a somewhat similar act by Pilate evoking protest, this time involving gold shields bearing the names of Pilate and Tiberius, which shields Pilate placed in his quarters at Jerusalem. A Jewish appeal went to the emperor at Rome, and Pilate was ordered to remove the shields to Caesarea. The embassy to Gaze, XXXVIII, 299-305. Josephus lists yet another disturbance. To construct an aqueduct to bring water into Jerusalem from a distance of about 40 kilometers 25 mi, Pilate used money from the temple treasury at Jerusalem. Large crowds clamored against this act when Pilate made a visit to the city. Pilate sent disguised soldiers to mix in with the multitude and, at a signal, to attack them, resulting in Jews being injured and some being killed. Jewish Antiquities, 18, 60-62 2. The Jewish War, 2, 175-177 9, 4. Apparently the project was carried through to completion. This latter conflict is often suggested as the occasion when Pilate mixed the blood of Galileans with their sacrifices, as recorded at Luke 13. 1. From this expression it appears that these Galileans were slain right in the temple area. There is no way of determining if this incident relates to that described by Josephus or is a separate occasion. However, since the Galileans were subjects of Herod Antipas, the district ruler of Galilee, this slaughter may have been at least a factor contributing to the enmity that existed between Pilate and Herod up until the time of Jesus' trial. Luke 23. 6-12. Trial of Jesus. On Nisan 14, 33 CE at dawn, Jesus was brought by the Jewish leaders to Pilate. As they would not enter the Gentile ruler's premises, Pilate went out to them and inquired as to the charge against Jesus. The charges were that Jesus was subversive, was advocating non-payment of taxes, and was saying he was a king, thus rivaling Caesar. Told to take Jesus and judge him themselves, his accusers replied that it was not lawful for them to execute anyone. Pilate then took Jesus into the palace and questioned him concerning the charges. Picture, Volume 2, p. 741. Returning to the accusers, Pilate announced that he found no fault in the accused. The accusations continued, and upon learning that Jesus was from Galilee, Pilate sent him to Herod Antipas. Herod, displeased because Jesus refused to perform some sign, subjected him to mistreatment and ridicule and returned him to Pilate. The Jewish leaders and the people were again summoned, and Pilate renewed his efforts to avoid sentencing an innocent man to death, asking the crowd if they wanted Jesus released in accord with the custom of freeing a prisoner at each Passover festival. Instead, the crowd, incited by their religious leaders, clamored for the release of Barabbas, a robber, murderer, and seditionist. Repeated attempts by Pilate to free the accused brought only an increase in the shouting for Jesus' impalement. Fearing a riot and seeking to placate the crowd, Pilate acceded to their wishes, washing his hands with water as though cleansing them from blood guilt. Sometime prior to this, Pilate's wife had advised him of her troublesome textui acute muritra longo. Piles 641 actions of the Jews themselves were largely responsible for the strong measures the governor had taken against them. At any rate, the gospel accounts give some accurate insight into the man's makeup. His approach to matters was typical of the Roman ruler, his speech terse and blunt, outwardly expressing the skeptical attitude of the cynic, as in saying what is truth. He, nevertheless, showed fear, likely a superstitious fear, upon hearing that he was dealing with one who claimed to be God's son. Though obviously not the condescending type, he displayed the politician's lack of integrity. He was concerned primarily with his position, what his superiors would say if they heard of further disturbances in his province, fearful of appearing to be overly lenient toward those accused of sedition. Pilate recognized Jesus' innocence and the envy that motivated his accusers. Yet he gave in to the crowd and turned an innocent victim over for them to slaughter rather than risk damage to his political career. As part of the superior authorities, Pilate exercised power by divine tolerance. Row 13. When he bore responsibility for his decision, responsibility that water could not wash away. His wife's dream was evidently of divine origin, even as were the earthquake, the unusual darkness, and the rending of the curtain that took place on that day. Mount 27. 19, 45, 51-54. Lu 23. 44, 45. Her dream should have warned Pilate that this was no ordinary trial, no ordinary defendant. Yet, as Jesus said, the one delivering him to Pilate bore the greater guilt of sin. Joe 19. 10, 11. Judas, who originally betrayed Jesus, was called the son of destruction. Joe 17. 12. Those Pharisees who were guilty of complicity in a plot against Jesus' life were described as subjects for Gehenna. Mount 23. 15, 33. Compare Joe 8. 37-44. And particularly the high priest, who headed the Sanhedrin. Afterward Trophimus was one of Paul's traveling companions on the return leg of the trip through Macedonia into Asia Minor and on to Jerusalem. Act 20. 3-5, 17, 22. There Trophimus was seen with Paul, and when Paul took several others along with him into the temple grounds, the Jews thought that Trophimus, the Gentile, went beyond the court of the Gentiles, thereby defiling the temple. On this false assumption they mobbed Paul. Act 21. 26-30. 24. 6. Some years later, after Paul's first imprisonment, Trophimus traveled with him again. But when they got to Miletus, not far from Trophimus' hometown, Trophimus became sick and was unable to continue. 2-4. 20. Trumpet. A wind instrument consisting of a mouthpiece, a long metal tube, and a funnel-shaped end. In the wilderness, before Israel had broken camp for the first time, Jehovah commanded Moses to make 2 trumpets of silver. Of hammerwork. New 10. 2. Although no further description of these instruments is given, coins circulated at the time of the Maccabees and a relief on the Arch of Titus picture the trumpets as being from about 45 to 90 centimeters 1.5 to 3 feet in length, straight, ending in a bell. Josephus states that what Moses made was a kind of clarion with a narrow tube, slightly thicker than a flute, with a mouthpiece wide enough to admit the breath and a bell-shaped extremity such as trumpets have. Jewish Antiquities, 3, 291-12, 6. At the inauguration of Solomon's temple, 120 trumpets were played. 2ch 5. 12. 3 signals are described, employing 2 methods of playing. 1. Blowing both trumpets called the whole assembly of Israel to the tent of meeting. 2. Blowing one trumpet would summon only the chieftains who were heads over thousands. And 3. Blowing fluctuating blasts signaled the breaking up of camp. New 10. 3-7. Jehovah further directed that in times of war the trumpets should sound a war call. New 10. 9. This was done thereafter by the priest accompanying the army. New 31. 6. Abijah of Judah, when seeking to avert war with Jeroboam of Israel, pointed to these trumpets for sounding the battle alarm as a divine assurance of Judah's victory in warfare. When Jeroboam stubbornly persisted in his aggression, his forces were defeated by a Judean army that had been greatly encouraged by the priests loudly sounding the trumpets. 2ch 13. 12-15. Trumpets were included among the musical instruments in the temple. 2ch 5. 11-13. The trumpeters were sons of Aaron, the priests. New 10. 8. 2ch 29. 26. S3. 10. NE 12. 40, 41. Every account where the trumpet heb. Chatso middle.0 is mentioned without the priests being clearly identified as the players is an event of national importance, when the presence of the priests would be expected. It is therefore reasonable to suppose that they were the ones playing the trumpets. 2ch 15. 14. 20. 28. 23. 13. Compare 1ch 15. 24 with verses 28. There is a possibility, though, that a variety of trumpets existed, and some of these may have been possessed by non-priests. Jesus told his hearers not to blow a trumpet gr. Solmiddle.piso, related to salpigs, meaning trumpet to attract attention to one's acts of charity in imitation of hypocrites. Mount 6. 2. It is generally suggested that the